Good afternoon and welcome to the Monday, February 14th, 2022 Orono Town Council meeting. Roll call shows that Councilor Wingard, Councilor Robinson are joining me at the council chambers, and we are joined online by Councilor Gardner, Councilor Grenier, and Councilor Osher. First item on tonight's agenda is agenda review, and I believe we have some agenda corrections. And I will need a motion to amend the motion order 2228, 2229, and 2230 as indicated in the sheet that we have of the have our remote folks received a copy of this?
I sent it out. I don't know that Councilor Osher has it because I wasn't aware she was going to be joining us remotely, but I'm sure we can get it to her.
Great.
Do you have it, Megan? She was shaking her head.
No.
Okay.
No, she does. So can I have a motion to adjust the agenda as indicated on council on order 2228, 2229, and 2230. These orders are on the agenda. These are just corrections to them that we'll go when we get to them.
Move approval.
And the second, please. Second. And no discussion, so let's have a vote on this. Be unanimous vote, so I'm hoping we'll get a unanimous vote on this. And I guess we'll do it by roll call, Nancy.
Council Perry,
In favor?
Council Gardner,
In favor?
Osher. Council Osher,
In favor?
Council Robinson,
In favor.
Councilor Grenier,
In favor?
and Council Wingard.
In favor.
And their vote is 6 in favor and they're not opposed.
Thank you. And moving on to approval of the minutes of January 10th, 2022. Motion to approve, please.
So moved.
Second. Second, thank you. Any just corrections or additions to the minutes of January 10th, 2022? Then again, a roll call vote on the minutes, please, Nancy.
Council Perry,
In favor?
Council Gardner,
In favor?
Council Osher,
In favor?
Robinson,
In favor.
Council Grenier,
In favor?
and Council Wingard.
In favor.
And the vote is 6 in favor and they're not opposed.
Thank you. We have two public hearings this afternoon. Public hearing A to consider a vitulers license for Nest Coffee LLC, 24 Main Street in Orono. And Patrick Gesti, our code enforcement officer, is here on that item.
Yes, this is Patrick Gesti, code enforcement, and staff is recommending approval. And staff would be the police, fire, and town clerk.
Any public questions, comments, or council questions or comments on this public hearing? And we will close public hearing A and move on to public hearing B to consider a vitulers license for Black Bear Nutrition LLC, 5 Mill Street, Orono, Suite 5.
And staff has completed all inspections and is recommending approval.
Any questions or comments on this item? Seeing none, we will close public hearing B and move on to acknowledgements by council members. Starting on my left, Councilor Wingard, do you have any acknowledgements to make this evening?
I'd like to acknowledge the success of the Penobscot Valley Ski Club's recent races out at Caribou Bog, the Caribou Bog race, and followed shortly thereafter by the freestyle race. They were well attended, really well run, and it was great to see people out there.
Great. Thank you. Councilor Robinson?
I just, since our last meeting, I just wanted to acknowledge David Chase for camping tonight and
Yes.
Belle Ryder for putting that on, and it went off without a hitch, and it was a good enlightening experience. It was good to meet the candidates.
It was. Councilor Gardner?
Yes. So tonight I wanted to, it's kind of an acknowledgement and a little bit of a plug. So folks probably received their Riverside Adult Education Partnership brochure in the mail. I wanted to highlight a course in here that's being taught by Matthew Terrell, who is a history teacher at Orono High School. She's also a U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum teaching fellow, and she is working on her PhD in Holocaust studies. She is teaching a Holocaust history course that begins at the end of March. And she is very knowledgeable, and it'll be a really interesting course. So I encourage you out there to sign up if you're interested. And yeah, and how great that one of our very own teachers is so accomplished and is offering something so interesting. So check it out.
Thank you, Nate. Councilor Osher. Oh, you're muted.
Thank you. So sorry about that. I wanted to acknowledge that so many people from Orono have contacted me since I've been in the legislature to ask me to elevate some particular issue that they think is important. And mostly there's people asking me to support things. The first contact was in December of 2020 by Stuart Dexter, who we also hear from on the council, all the way up to half a dozen today, for more than 100 contacts from Orono residents. And I want to shout out to so many in the last week have been in support of LD 1626, which is a tribal sovereignty bill that's going to be discussed in public hearing on Tuesday of this week. And so I just am so impressed. I've talked to other legislators and they do not get as many contacts from their constituents. So I just really want to support. It's great for democracy when people are engaged in politics. And I think it's a wonderful thing that Orono residents are so engaged. And I
Thank you, Laura.
encourage more people to contact me.
Councilor Grenier.
Yeah, I mean, we've all seen the sign that's hanging above our streets out by the town office, but I want to acknowledge the 7, I believe, Olympians that are from the University of Maine. What an amazing accomplishment. And I'm sure their countries and family are as equally excited, but I wanted to acknowledge them.
Thank you. I would acknowledge our Public Works Department. They've had a very challenging winter. First part of the winter was all ice, and then we've had some major snowstorms, and they have done just an amazing job of keeping our roads safe and our sidewalks as passable as they can be. So thank you, Public Works. Moving on to the consent agenda, can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda, please? Thank you. And a second. Second. And with that, let's have a vote on the consent agenda.
Council Perry,
In favor?
Council Gardner,
In favor?
Council Osher,
In favor?
Council Robertson,
In favor.
Council Grenier,
In favor?
and Council Windberg.
In favor.
And the vote is 6 in favor and they're none opposed.
Thank you, Nancy. Now we're going to move on to our new business, and I will read the orders as they have been corrected, so you'll know exactly what you're voting on. Order 2228, order authorizing the town manager to apply for a fire forest service project canopy grant for a municipal tree inventory in the amount of $5,000 with the required match provided through in-kind contributions and/or funds drawn from the approved municipal operating budget. And further, accepting and authorizing the town manager to expend said funds in accordance with grant requirements. Could I have a motion to approve order 2228, please? Thank you, Jeff. The second?
Second.
Thank you. And is that you or is that our deputy fire chief?
No, I am pinch hitting for Rob Yerxa this evening. So this is.
Okay, Rob
actually-
is on the screen.
Oh, wow, I didn't even see him. I'm not gonna pinch hit. I'll let him do it.
You're on, Robert.
Actually, I brought Megan along because she's done the lion's share of the work here. So
she's working with, we've been working with the tree board for this grant application as well as the next one. The first grant is a planning grant, which will actually help us update our tree inventory, which is an important step for the next thing that will come along, which will be an upgrade to our management plan, which is now almost 20 years old and needs to be updated. So this is a piece of the work that the tree board's been working on. First thing we did, as you recall, earlier in the year was revise the vegetation ordinance. Now an update to the tree inventory, which will take care of all the trees within the right of way, our urban parks and areas like that. We're actually going to count and identify every tree in those right of ways. So big project, but we've got some help from a master's student at the University of Maine who's going to help us out with a lot of the legwork, and this grant will help pay for all of that effort.
Megan, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah.
I'd just like to add this grant is provided by the Maine Forest Service. And we will actually not exceed, we're looking more to spend $2,500 on the inventory, not the 10,000 that's on the agenda. So I just wanted to make that clear.
Questions from council?
It's been amended to 5.
Yeah, the order is amended to 5,000.
Not to exceed.
No other questions? Okay, let's have a vote on order 2228.
Council Perry,
In favor?
Council Gardner,
In favor?
Council Osher,
In favor?
Council Robertson,
In favor.
Council Grenier,
In favor?
and Council Wingard.
In favor.
And the vote is 6 in favor and they're not opposed.
Thank you. So order 2229. Order authorizing the town manager to apply for a Forest Service project canopy grant for planting and maintenance of trees and shrubberies in the buffer zone related to the main technology park, Godfrey Drive area, in an amount not to exceed $1,500, with the required match provided through in-kind contributions and/or funds drawn from the approved municipal operating budget, and further accepting and authorizing the town manager to expend said funds in accordance with grant requirements. Motion to approve, please.
Move approval.
And a second.
Second.
Thank you. And is this Rob again or Megan?
So this is the second application under the same Maine Forest Service program. This one will fund actual planting of trees. About 125 trees will be planted in the Godfrey Drive buffer strip. So this is an area that acts as a buffer between the development on Godfrey Drive and the Sylvan Road residents that was set up when the park was originally built, I believe back in the 80s. So what happened is the buffer strip just grew up. And so the trees are tall now. They don't act as a buffer at the surface level like they used to. And so we're gonna, this fall, Public Works went in and cleaned up a lot of the dead standing trees, a lot of the, there was some buckthorn in there, so some invasive plants that were in there. We went in and cleaned all that up. And so now the area is ready we can plant an understory there. So the smaller plantings will grow up and create that buffer again, while still allowing the larger trees to go on. As we've been working with the tree board, recommendations from the tree board for this support the project. So like I said, this is the second one, and this is just about a $750 budget for this one. So
Anything further? Questions or comments? Then let's vote on that.
Council Perry,
In favor?
Council Gardner,
In favor?
Council Osha,
In favor?
Council Robertson,
In favor.
Council Grenier,
In favor?
Council Wingard.
In favor.
And the vote is 6 in favor and they're not opposed.
Thank you. Order 2230, order authorizing the town manager to apply for FY22 Homeland Security Grant through Penobscot Emergency Management Agency for hazmat perimeter detection equipment in the amount not to exceed $85,000 with a local match of up to $15,000 to be paid from hazmat reserve funds, and further accepting and authorizing the town manager to expend such funds in accordance with grant requirements. And I'll bet that's why our deputy chief is here.
You know it.
Devin.
All right, so,
Oh, thank you. Motion to approve.
Move approval.
And second.
And I was doing so well.
Yes.
all right. So perimeter air monitoring is a vital piece of equipment for us. We actually used to have it, but our equipment became obsolete a few, 2 years ago at least. We've been able to work with the 11th CST team when we have major events to be able to utilize their perimeter monitor. However, the 11th CST is obviously one of those organizations that can be utilized anywhere in the state or country. So currently, we don't have that perimeter air monitoring to be able to provide that in large scale events. So what it is, it's equipment that is utilized downrange or in a large gathering that we can actually have real-time air monitoring of that location, so that we don't actually have to have some of our members standing there. People are wondering why we're holding a meter. It's a little bit safer for our people because we also don't just stand there in hazmat suits with a meter that would scare people. So we can actually locate these anywhere in a facility or outside. In there, they're pretty inconspicuous. I mean, you really can't see them. So that's what we normally do, and then we can remote monitor that. So that's good for like events, but also for our individuals that are downrange, conducting any type of leak sealing or whatever. They're busy, they can't keep an eye on their meters. We can actually see that from that distance. So if there's any wind shifts or there's a leak, an increase in the leak of hazardous materials, we'll see it. We'll see it and be able to notify and make proper strategic and tactical considerations for the incident. So that's really what that device does for us. And this is a funding source that we've looked into to be able to replace our old stuff that's obsolete. And it's an opportunity that the town would have to be able to fund.
So the Penobscot Emergency Management, I don't know if they're an agency or just an association. They are allocated a certain amount of federal money every year. And they then turn around and they split it. I think it's 75% fire and 25% police. And then all of the entities within the county can apply through them to then have their application move forward to be funded. So that's why this seems a little roundabout in here. The hazmat reserve fund is dedicated money, can only be spent on hazmat. And we currently have a balance of $165,000 in that account. So we have enough, we have money. The grant does not require a match. However, we're also aware that this request is much larger than what they normally would fund. So we think adding a match might make it a little bit more attractive for them. We're also hoping to do a little bit of outreach with area fire departments to make sure that they are aware that we're a regional team, because we'll step up and do it, but we won't step up and do it if it's going to fall back on the taxpayers. So that's where we are.
Kevin, you mentioned that in the interim, you've been able to borrow that service from another agency.
Yeah, we actually have to make a request.
Who is that again?
It's the 11th CST Civil Support Team. Well, that's actually a military support team. So they're a valuable asset to the state and region. They work very well with us. And yeah, we just have to go through the proper channels to request that. It has to go through their upper chain of command. And then they authorize equipment and personnel if needed.
Thank you.
How often do you deploy this piece of equipment?
So on average, I would say once or twice a year. Currently, real world incidences, I have to go back and look at those numbers to see what we've been on in the past few years. But I guarantee we usually set up for humane graduation. So those devices, no one really knows, but is utilized for that. So we can actually have real-time air monitoring within the structure itself. Also helps us set up control zones and also evacuation and decon lines to be able to get people properly out and decon.
Once all this equipment's been updated and it's new, how long, what's the time period for it? Usually typically?
For like life.
Yeah, just like,
program.
yeah.
So this company, Area Array, is actually the device that we're looking into. It's also compatible and interoperable with the CST. So if we ever did get on scene of a real world incident, we'd be able to look at each other's monitors. So I don't have like a long-term like understanding of how long they last. I do know Area Array supports their system very well, and they've had really good luck. That's why the CSTs throughout the country have those. Some of the other hazardous material teams down south, I believe also use them too.
Yeah.
So we could be interoperable with them as well.
Is it like a technology thing more than a?
I think there's some technology, Cheryl, but from a depreciation standpoint, if I was gonna put this on the books,
Right.
I probably would peg its useful life around 15 years would be my guess.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not something that gets outdated
not
because of
every
the
3 years.
technology part of it.
Right.
Switch that out. Okay.
Other questions? Any of our remote folks have any questions on this? No. Thank you, Kevin. It seems like you're taking advantage of a good opportunity to get some new equipment. So let's have a vote on order 2230, please, Nancy.
Council Barry,
In favor?
Council Gardner,
In favor?
Council Osher,
In favor?
Council Robinson,
In favor.
Council Grenier,
In favor?
and Council Lundar.
In favor.
And the vote is 6 in favor and they're none opposed.
Thank you, Nancy. Moving on to order 2231. Order authorizing the town manager to enter an agreement with Port City Architecture of Portland, Maine for a public safety building facility assessment at a cost not to exceed $30,000 with funds drawn from the approved FY22 capital facilities budget and further reallocating $5,000 from the FY22 overlay budget to the FY22 capital facilities budget for this project. And a second.
Second.
Thank you.
So we talked about the public safety building assessment during the budget process. We have some pretty major issues with mechanical systems and some concerns about some structural issues. Want to make sure that we are not running into issues with that. The other thing that this assessment is looking at is there a better use of this space? Can we make minor modifications to lessen what we're seeing as some real space constraints within the department? So we put out a request for qualifications and interviewed. We had 4 responding companies, firms. The firms are a combination of engineering and architecture. We interviewed all 4 and we're very pleased with Port City. I have started negotiation on the budget and the scope of work. I'm asking, just so we can keep things moving, I am asking to authorize me to complete that budget and scope. It looks like we're gonna be right around 25 to 28,000, but I would like just a little bit of room. So that is what this is for.
Port City is not a firm we've done business with before, is my understanding.
No, they are not. They are highly regarded. I spoke with someone who had worked with them, a community member that had worked with them on a project in Falmouth. And then we did reference checking. The one that I got the most information from was the city of Augusta. They used them for feasibility study and building assessments for their police department. The assistant city manager, who was also their police chief, raved about them. And some of the, there's a little bit of flatness that comes across when you're doing Zoom interviews. And I was a little concerned about that. And what we heard is that they're a very personable firm. So that kind of took away the one concern. They want to be known and turned to build public safety buildings. That is kind of, in their interview, they talked about CALIA, they talked about NFPA, not just in terms of NFPA building requirements, but what it takes to run a fire department. And so we really felt like we were bringing somebody onto the team that understood the operation.
Great. Good. Questions or comments on this order? We have an idea when they might be able to start?
Well, I'm hoping if I can authorize to start, ink the contract, that we should be able to get them here. The goal is to have preliminary information to inform the budget.
Yes.
So we know we have some mechanical issues over there, and what I don't want to do is spend money to patch something if a little bit more would fix it. So that was my request, and part of what we're working through right now is the timeline to make sure that we have good information when we build the budget.
Other questions or comments? Ready for a vote? Nancy, roll call vote, please.
All right, Council Perry,
In favor?
Council Gardner,
In favor?
Council Osher,
In favor?
Council Robertson,
In favor.
Council Grenier,
In favor?
and Council Wingard.
In favor.
And the vote is 6 in favor and they're not opposed.
Thank you. Moving on to council committee and representative reports. Let's start with Cheryl.
Sure. We met, the Environment Committee met, I think, twice since our last meeting, because we had a special committee meeting. We introduced Megan at our last interview, our last committee meeting. We had a grant drafted that was on the table that we discussed, that we effectively made because the concern for PFAS that's out in the world right now. It was a wonderful project, and Megan worked really hard on bringing that grant to us, but we erred on the side of caution, and we couldn't in good faith do that. We had a special committee meeting where Megan again presented a list of community actions and for a climate action grant through the state. And we are still working on that. We'll be talking about that again at our next environment meeting, and we're narrowing it down to a project that includes the community, municipal buildings, and a weatherized Orono campaign on some level. So the best use of funds to go to the people of Orono, and we're trying to spread it as best we can around to help people out with their fossil fuel non-consumption. And but this will be next. This will be for the next winter.
Thank you.
And those were the meetings.
Councilor Gardner?
Yes, so I'm gonna try to scroll through all these different agendas. I covered the Community Development Committee meeting that was on the 7th, last Monday. The item we discussed there was identifying priorities and next steps for developing a formal town plan related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So we went over the staff report that we had received previously regarding all of the things connected to our DEI efforts that are already underway or have been underway or are in process that the staff reported to us. And then we also discussed, like how we would take our next step. We're looking at how to come up with a formal charge for a DEI or a JEDI committee. And we're in that process of developing the questionnaire for counselors to read and respond to for kind of our discussion about a charge for that committee. And we also are going to be diving deep into our matrix and our draft DEI toolkit for a later discussion on that committee. Now let me go to my next agenda. Let's see. So on January 31st, the comp plan committee met to discuss a few items. One was the review of planning board reports for two different items, changing the zoning for Pine Street, for a couple of lots on Pine Street, including the library, and also the permitting process for homestays or short-term rentals. We also had a general project update. I'm trying to see if, let's see. I don't think I had anything on the 24th. So I think that's it.
Thank you. Councilor Ocher, is there anything you'd like to report on?
No reports.
You're as busy as you can be, I'm sure, with the legislative responsibilities. Hey, Councilor Grenny, or anything you wanted to add to the report that Megan gave?
No, I want to thank Councilor Gardner for doing that. I was a bit under the weather that day, and it was much appreciated. The continuation from the January 31st meeting. The only other additional thing I had was on January 24th. There was a report with a lengthy conversation about Webster Park neighborhood. Staff and councilors met with the neighborhood on December 8th. Probably about 31 people were attending. And we left it at a report would be created and sent to the neighborhood. Then we talked about implementing regular community conversation groups with key staff. Chief Lowe, Mitch, and Sophie came up with this idea, and the goal is to create communication between community and staff. We considered 4 forums a year, bringing the key staff to each forum, and we had hoped to have the first one on May 1st. And that's what I had.
Thank you, Terry. Finance and Operations Committee met last week. We discussed the service and operational level for the swimming pool and the Rules Landing. And the feedback from council was we wanted to maintain a thorough level of service in both of those areas. And I look forward to having a great summer in both places. So that concludes our council committee reports. Future agenda items. I do have one future agenda item. Maybe I'll wait just a minute and see if Jeff returns. Yeah, phone call, I believe. Yeah. So on the future agenda items, I think we all received a letter from an Orono resident recently in regard to fluoridation of the Orono water supply. This is a topic that we discussed in some length last year, had some public presentations, and decided not to go any further with it at this point, but recognize that community members of the petition process could bring this to the voters if they felt strongly about it. I just want to get some feedback from council if we're still on the same page with that item, or if you want to do anything differently with the letter we received from the Orono resident. Councilor Ocher.
The Orono resident is a professor of civil and environmental engineering. And so I did reach out to her prior to the previous discussion, and she emailed me her comments. And I guess when I don't know what prompted her to write again, but I had already read those out. So I believe that it is something that we should be evaluating, because we have the University of Maine here and we have people at the university who do this kind of research. And although across the country, people have continued to do what we have done, which is fluorinate our water, there's a lot of data to support that this is not the best way to work on people's dental hygiene and health, which although it was at the time when it was commonly placed in the water. So I thought it was great that she contacted us. It seemed, after the fact, when we'd already had the discussion, although we still have the water being fluorinated, and I won't be on the council by the time this gets discussed, but I still believe that the best way to proceed is to learn from the people who are doing the science right now and get their thoughts on it. So I was glad that she wrote, and I would be in support of this being revisited, and perhaps with having a panel of people who do this kind of work to educate us if we're uncomfortable making a choice different than the one we made.
Okay, other comments, Cheryl?
I think since this is a vote, I mean, this has to go to a vote, that if we get a public petition, then we can act on it. But this isn't a decision that we can make as a council. This has to go to a vote.
I mean, our decision would be, do we want to pursue this any
Right.
further on the way to a possible municipal vote?
I'm comfortable with it if a public petition comes up, and that's what the town of Orono wants, I'm comfortable staying the course.
Okay.
And not releasing it.
Similarly to Cheryl, I would certainly be moved to consider it if there were a public petition, because again, this is something that the community would be voting on. Whether we choose to send it to referendum, I wouldn't initiate that process, quite frankly, until either one of two things happens. Either there is some science to indicate that it's actually dangerous, or we make great strides in healthcare equity. Because as much as there are better ways to take care of people's teeth, we live in a country where people don't make enough money. They don't have health insurance and dental insurance. They don't have access to dental care. They don't maybe even have access to information about how to take care of their own teeth at home, or, the supplies to do that properly. So until we live in a more economically and healthcare equity centered society, or we find out that it's very, very dangerous, I wouldn't initiate this referendum process without some sort of public groundswell of support.
Other comments? Councilor Wingard or Councilor Grenier? So I'm not getting a majority of folks thinking that we should discuss this further at this point in time. Yes.
So it sounds to me that this one letter does not sway our council, but that there was two different people just mentioned that if there was a public petition, I think the word was used, that it would ask us to make this onto a referendum, that they would be in support. Is that true?
Yeah.
So then perhaps to write back to Dr. McCrae that if that's what we suggest.
I think that's a good idea.
I just want to clarify, I'm not saying I'm in support of sending it to referendum if people send us a petition. I'm saying I'm not considering sending it to referendum without a large public groundswell of support, since the question for us is to put it to voters or not. So I'm not saying I would support putting it out to referendum if we got a petition. I'm saying the conversation around sending it to referendum, I would revisit that conversation if there seemed to be a large swell of public support to do so.
Thank you for the clarification. So Sophie, you got some information to get back to the Orono resident?
Yeah, I did. I think I copied everybody on my initial response, and I'll just let her know that this came up. And we're not going to move it forward to an agenda topic. However, I will point her to the relevant place in statute that outlines the petition process.
Great.
Tom, I do have one thing to add to this, items of concern. There was a letter, there was an email today on a private parents' website about writing to the Orono Council about PFAS that's in the river from the Nine Dragons. And that, and it was a request to do something. I responded, not as a council member, but I'm following these bills in the Environment and Natural Resources Committee in the legislature right now. And Orono can't do anything about it. So if we get letters about PFAS in the river, it's a state issue. And the state is on it. The municipalities will be involved at some level when they have made a decision about what to do. 2 of those PFAS bills, I believe, have been tabled. The out-of-state waste, the 1639, is moving to the legislature, which also we're centered around Old Town. We'll be seeing a lot of probably media and Bangor Daily News stories and things like that about what's happening with Juniper Ridge landfill and Nine Dragons. So it's a state issue. It's not an Orono issue. We don't have even close to the technology to take those forever chemicals out of the water. And it's in Old Town. It's not in Orono. So if you get letters.
Yep. Any other items of concern or future agenda items? Hearing none, we'll move on to public petitions. I don't think we have any public petitions. Public comments. It's Bill managing this. Do we have any public comments, Bill?
I don't see anybody with their hand raised.
Thank you, ma'am. And we now have a executive session. And I would like a motion to move into executive. I
Tom,
beg your pardon.
you added order,
2232.
and that was the adding a public hearing, noticing a public hearing for the next meeting. It's at the very top of this page.
I completely missed it.
Oh, well, there you
So
go.
let's go back to
Oh,
new business. And on the top of the page that was distributed, we have order 2233. Order setting the date of March 14th, 2022 at 5 p.m. for a public hearing to consider an ordinance amendment to section 18-31 definitions, section 18-106 schedule of uses, and section 18-131 home occupations to amend zoning and performance standards for homestays.
Move approval.
And second, thank you. Anything you want to say about this, Philby?
No, this normally would have been on consent. As you can tell, I was trying to cobble an agenda together at the last minute and missed it, my fault. It's just moving that homestay process forward for a public hearing.
Great. Any questions or comments? Then let's have a roll call vote on order 2233, and my apologies for missing it.
Council Perry,
In favor?
Council Gardner,
In favor?
Council Osher,
In favor.
Council Robinson,
in favor.
Council Grenier,
In favor?
Council Wingard.
In favor.
And the vote is 6 in favor and they're not opposed.
All right. Then we have a motion to move into executive session pursuant to 36 MRSA section 841 to consider a request for a poverty abatement based on poverty and or disability, number 2022-001. We will have no further public business after this.
So we're gonna come out of this and make a vote, but
On
we
this.
can't, yeah, we can't discuss the order. It will be a simple up or down. There will be no discussion.
Yep.
So in the past, I think we've said that we can leave the Zoom and do that here, we'll be open.
So a motion to go into executive session, please.
Second.
And seconded. And roll call vote, please, Nancy.
Council Perry,
In favor?
Council Gardner,
In favor?
Council Osher,
In favor?
Council Robertson,
In favor.
Council Greenyer,
In favor?
and Council Wingo.
In favor.
And the vote is 6 in favor and they're not opposed.
Okay, now how do we manage this week?
So Val, can we cut this feed? I will send the link to Lori because I don't know that she has that. Everybody else, you have that? Val, can you start the meeting?
Yes, I will do so.
Thank you.